Michael Kirst is a former professor of education at Stanford University and is president of the California State Board of Education. He has a deep understanding of the complexities of state law, including the challenges that digital learning is facing as it tries to enter a traditional public school system. I have with me today Michael Kirst, who is the president of the State Board of Education in the state of California. He was a professor at Stanford University for many years, and it's just a great opportunity to talk with him about the latest developments that are happening in American education, digital learning. Mike, how must the law change if you're going to have a lot of digital learning introduced into the educational system in California? Is it a fairly simple task, or is it more complicated than that?
The most complicated part would be blended learning, where the classroom instruction alternates with some digital angle. We have policy for existing traditional schools and for all virtual schools where there no contact with students directly except through an intermediary teacher.
So how many students take that virtual kind of learning situation?
Yeah, it's not huge in California, but I'd say it could be as much as 0.5% to 1% who are taking full virtual education, could be higher.
But what if you have a mix of taking some courses online, some in the classroom? What happens then?
That's where the problem is. We have no policy for that, and it really falls in the cracks. And so our basic approach now is to sort of get out of the way. I've conducted search and destroy missions for looking at the code. For example, we have...
The code, you mean by
the education code, yeah. Where the education code in California restricts them. These are often laws or regulations passed by the state board.
So how many laws are in that code, or how many regulations are in that code?
Oh, there'd be dozens of pages. Among them would be, when we regulate class size, we don't adjust for blended learning at the site, so that would run into problems. We have a law that students have to be in the sight line of teachers. And in blended learning, often they have an office on the side, but they're not looking at them.
So every teacher has to have her eye on all the pupils.
All the pupils at all the time. We have a regulation that various technicians that would run blended learning, we have no certification for them, so we have to do it through certified teachers, perhaps. If they want to be out of school for a period of time and have kids taking some courses at their home digitally, and then they come in for 3 days a week or something, our laws don't work with that very well. And we have other restrictions on how long the school day must be. So the whole panoply of laws don't fit very well with a blended concept.
Well, there's this idea of mastery learning, that once you've learned the material, you've passed the course. But there's this other idea out there that you pass a course if you've taken that course for 180 days or whatever the number of days in the year are. So how can you blend those two together?
Well, I think we would have to have pretty specific and more specific assessments than we have. If you're talking about knowing something that's not a whole course, we could have a badge or a certificate, which is growing in higher education. And we could then use state assessments, but we'd have to have state assessments in a lot of different fields than we have them now. And we don't do much in history, social studies, art and music. So even to get a full curriculum, it would be difficult to do that.
So what do you see as the future? Now, some people say that education is going to be totally transformed, that it's a totally disruptive innovation. Do you buy into that line of thinking?
Not with young children. I can see a bigger impact in higher education, particularly among students who don't need much help. But parents still want the fundamental function of public schools, safe child custody. And they don't want to release it to out of school that much, and they work. And within school, I think it'll trickle in slowly, more quickly in some ways. It'll be incremental, but it won't be a very quick disruption.
Well, the voters in the state of California are fortunate to have your leadership, and so thank you very much for joining us, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
Larry Cuban is a former professor of education at Stanford University. He has followed innovations in education over many years. He remains skeptical that digital learning will have any more of a revolutionary impact than previous technological innovations. I'm here with Larry Cuban, who's a person who knows classrooms from the inside. He was a school teacher, he was a school superintendent, he was a professor at Stanford University, and now he does a blog post on school reform, and it's on Larry Cuban at WordPress.com. Isn't this John Dewey's dream? We are going to have truly, finally, at last, progressive education where every child learns the things the child wants to learn at the child's pace, and the system will respond to the child's needs.
Part of John Dewey, but John Dewey would probably wince at that, Paul. First of all, the software is not up to that kind of high standard, does not meet the threshold of supplying the kind of customized learning that a lot of the vendors say that it does. That's one thing. The other is that John Dewey always believed in the relationship between the teacher and the student as being a crucial component of learning. Yeah.
So you're a Luddite. You know, a Luddite, they all say, is a person who's against technological change and innovation. They always, didn't like the sewing machine back 300 years ago, and now they don't like machines helping them teach. So how do you defend yourself against that accusation?
I think that's inflammatory language, Paul. If I were defensive and apologetic, I would pull out my iPhone and I would tell you that I have a laptop at home, a desktop at home, and an iPad. But I'm not going to be defensive or apologetic. No, I've seen teachers use software in K-12 and hardware in K-12 situations that I thought was most imaginative and creative, and I think was wonderful for the kids and engaged them. Whether it produced academic achievement, whether it made those kids ready for the workplace, I have no idea. But I'm not opposed to it because what is really important is what is the learning goal that you're after? And how can you use that piece of hardware, that piece of software to get you where you want to go? That's the question that a lot of vendors, a lot of technophile enthusiasts, they do not spend much time thinking about that, but teachers do.
So how about the risks? I mean, let's say that the policymakers start pushing this and they say, you have to do this, you have to do that, you got to use these machines for better or worse. Teachers have to adapt. What are the dangers?
The dangers are what we see going on around the country is that it's too fast, too soon, teachers are unprepared, and I have to remind you, Paul, as you probably know, that most teachers are uninvolved in those decisions, those million-dollar decisions to buy the hardware and software. It's usually a policy decision reached by the board and the superintendent, and then they decide not only for the purchase, but the deployment of that. Then they will have some professional development. Teachers are hardly involved in that. Teachers ask different questions than policymakers ask about curriculum and instruction. Teachers want to know if kids are going to learn more because they are being asked to change their instruction. They want to know how durable, how reliable is this software and hardware. Those questions rarely come up. But most teachers were using the one-to-one laptops in different ways. Mostly they were using it to help them do what they would do every day. So a lot of teachers teach in a teacher-centered way in high schools. They lecture, they have kids take notes, so the kids will use their laptops for that. But for a lot of policymakers, they think that putting that kind of machinery and software into classrooms will alter how teachers teach to be like Dewey would love, but that has not happened.
Well, let's think worldwide.
Okay.
There's a lot of young children around the world who
Right.
have no education at all, or
Right.
really terrible schools. Is this a possible transforming opportunity for education worldwide? Maybe in industrialized countries where you have a well-established school system and strong administrative structures, maybe this is a marginal improvement. But how about in developing countries around the world?
There has been a lot of effort taken that. The One Laptop Per Child initiative, which had to be well over a decade, has gone into a number of countries. There are projects in Peru, Uruguay, Portugal, Spain, where they buy a lot of these, in India too, where they buy all of these devices and make it available to kids because teachers require more resources, require more training, and and a lot of them think that simply that kids having the devices will open up an education to them. That generally has not happened. But the enthusiasm, the money that follows that idea has not gone away, that these machines are magical. There's something miraculous about them in opening up a world for kids who have very little resource in developing nations.
So in summary, you would say there is no magic bullet out there, and digital technology is not going to be the magic bullet any more than the nostrums of the past.
You took the words out of my mouth, Paul.
Thank you, Larry. This was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.